Bring to us your poetry from inspiration source. Come join us with your images, your verses, words, and thought. From here, we'll share your balladry with those who do not know it. This platform's here for you to show the world that you're the poet.
Welcome to episode 35 of You're the Poet, the poetry podcast featuring you. I'm host Matt Burgio, and I'm here with co-host Phil Burgio. Phil, welcome.
Thank you.
Here at You're the Poet, our purpose is to share our love of poetry with the world and invite you to do the same. I want to start by saying thank you to all of our listeners who have made You're the Poet possible. We hope you enjoyed the podcast and the poetry that is shared here. Our featured guest for this episode is Anthony Sanders, who is joining us from Michigan. Anthony, welcome.
Nice to be here.
Hey, we're glad you could join us, and we look forward to your contribution to the episode. To start things off, I'm going to share a classic poem for the episode. This poem is by American artist, writer, and journalist Gwendolyn Bennett. She lived from 1902 to 1981 and died at the age of 78. She was very influential in the literary, artistic, and political movements within the Harlem Renaissance. I first discovered Gwendolyn Bennett on the Poetry for All podcast, where they discussed her poem, I Build America, in episode 86. I recommend checking that out for a more detailed look at Bennett and her style. Gwendolyn Bennett was born in Texas. She spent a few years in Nevada, where her parents were taught at the Paiute Indian Reservation, and then they moved to D.C. when she was 4, where her dad got a position at Howard University. They divorced when she was 7, and her father kind of kidnapped her and took her to the East. So they settled in Brooklyn, where she attended the prestigious Girls High School, and she was the first African-American to join their literary and dramatic societies there. And she won first place in the school-wide art contest. She had a very prolific background in art studies, both in high school, and she went to Columbia University and the Pratt Institute and studied art. But during this time also, she had some of her poetry published, both in The Crisis, which is the official magazine of the NAACP, and in Opportunity, a publication of the National Urban League. Then later on, after graduation, she did some study in Paris, again with her art. And then she eventually came back to New York and lived in Harlem and did a lot of work with the Harlem Renaissance. She's most noted for her poetry and writing associated with the Harlem Renaissance, though her work in graphic design was still utilized on some of their magazine covers and such. This poem I'm sharing today is called Wind. The wind was a carefree soul that broke the chains of the earth and strode for a moment across the land with the wild halloo of his mirth. He little cared that he ripped up trees, that houses fell at his hand, that his step broke calm on the breast of seas, that his feet stirred clouds of sand. But when he had had his little joke, had shouted and laughed and sung, when the trees were scarred, their branches broke, and their foliage aching hung, he crept to his cave with a stealthy tread, with rain-filled eyes and low-bowed head. Gwendolyn Bennett.
How appropriate, because yesterday we had major storms and we had a tornado very close to us, actually 2 tornadoes very close to us, one north, one south of us, and we dodged the bullet.
Yeah, it's true. We had the same kind of sideways rain going here. We had a severe thunderstorm warning and knocked our power out for a while.
Yeah, I think it came down from the north.
Yeah, it was really, kind of
slant,
from Texas to the Great Lakes.
Wow.
I'm surprised we didn't have any power failure here, but then again, we're blessed, knock on wood.
Oh, yeah. And knowing that the climate that Gwendolyn Bennett was growing up in, I got a feeling that when she's talking about the wind, she's not just talking about the wind, that she's talking about some forces that are coming in and scarring and breaking things. I think there's some deeper meaning there within her work. But she's definitely worth checking out. If I mentioned that Poetry for All, that her I Build America, that poem was very intriguing. And she's got a lot of kind of deep poems that are worth checking out. All right, from here, we're going to go to Phil to share his poem for the episode. Phil?
This theme for this poem has been in my mind for years, actually decades. When we first moved here down in one of the small towns, there was this little church, and it's no longer there. But here's my poem about that. I've been thinking about writing a poem about this for a long time. The little church. A church stood where now stands a factory, a small white hall of humble majesty. Worshippers no longer meet to pray. They all have gone, moved away. The times have changed, progress is norm, and mankind, so true to form, has moved on to pursue the gold by removing the good because it's old. The sounds and noise of industry have replaced the prayers and homilies. Too often faith is ignored for gain, profit, and a golden hoard. But in the end, we realize that God is needed in our lives. Philip Burgio.
All right, thank you. You know, that poem's been on your mind so long that I have no memory of this little church. I do know what you're talking about from where it once stood, but
Yeah.
good representation and memorial there for that.
Oh yeah, I related to that in the sense that when I was younger, I knew of a lot of little churches from down south in those kind of backwoods, hometowny areas. That nowadays, even some that are still our churches, aren't the same kind of home for worship and praise because they've moved on in kind of a almost greedy fashion to try and draw bigger and bigger crowds, going more for quality than quantity. Because even if it's not swept away by some kind of factory, it is some kind of industry,
Mm-hmm.
stealing it away from the genuineness of praise and worship.
I agree. But I do know it's a struggle. I know even some of the small local churches here, like there's a local Methodist church that, you know, they're small and they stay small and try to do what they can, but, you know, they're losing a lot of the younger parishioners to these bigger, brighter, newer churches. And so those smaller, older churches try to get innovative with what they're doing to hang on to what they can. So it's a struggle for sure. All right, from here, I'm going to share a poem for the episode. This is a poem that just has to do with missing a loved one at night. Alone at night. The whispers in the night have all been silenced. Actually, I just shut the radio off, which had dimly filled the room like long-forgotten thoughts put on the back burner of my memory. Ah, silence. But not really. The gurgle of the fish tank adds its flowing water sounds to the night, reminding me of nature recordings that help you relax. But I am not relaxed. I am restless. Just like my mice who scurry in their cage, I join in their nocturnal plight. In random callings, the living room heater occasionally joins the song, and passing cars hum, then fade across the highway. All of the sounds of a normal night. All of the sounds but one. This night lacks the sound I need to end my dismal day. The gentle sigh of angel's breath, as peacefully she sleeps. Matthew Burgio.
I like that one. Reminds me of the dream I had the other night.
Thank you.
This one's more like a comment on like how the poem's structured. You said it was about missing someone, and you're reading it, and I got it pulled up so I can read along on my phone because I didn't read these ahead of time. I wanted to be surprised by them and you give kind of like a genuine reaction and enjoy them. And I was like, I don't know where this is going. And then when you got to the end, I was like, dang, that took a turn. I wasn't necessarily, like you said, missing, but I didn't know where it was going to go. Like you just missed that they're there, that they were dead. And I was like building the image in my head. And guess I didn't factor in putting in a person beside you in bed. It's like, ooh.
Yeah, it's just kind of written in the moment when it was happening. So, you know, it's like we think about there being alone and being quiet, but then you notice all the random sounds that are going on around you. And so, yeah, but missing the sounds you really want to hear of that loved one beside you.
Oh, yeah. That can take a lot from you.
Oh, yeah. All right. From here, we're going to turn to our guest section of the episode. Anthony, you're the poet. Show us what you've got.
So this first one is untitled, but it's more of a kind of expression of how you take care of your soul just as much as you take care of your body. When I exercise, I feel closer to God because I'm taking care of His temple. I feel the same way when I read because it keeps the right characters in the building. This isn't perfect by any means, but it's a great feeling. Anthony Sanders.
I like that one, even though it was short.
You talk about taking care of your body and your soul. And in a humorous vein, I mentioned that to my doctor when I told her about my eating habits. And I says, yeah, got to take care of your body, but you got to take care of your soul. So that cream puff and the cookies, that feeds your soul. And she goes, whatever. So.
That's funny. But yeah, no, good there. And I like how you incorporated the reading as well.
Thank you.
I like that. And having the right characters in the building. I thought that was a good analogy there.
Short, but it was a good one.
Thank you. I suppose since I have two, I was going to just share the other one. This one's called The Journey. Before I read this one, I'm not classically trained in poetry or writing or any of that. And because of rough backgrounds and just generally a hard life, it's hard to talk about without talking. Some of it's still fresh, only really a few months away from some of the harder things. And all of it's been a quest God has sent me on. I have come to learn to discover what He's wanted for me. Through that, a lot of times I'll sit and write poems like The Journey. There once was a time when I was afraid. I held on as long as I could, but it was no use. I was never safe. It never felt as it should. Their hands were the reaper because they only took my sanity, my hope, my me. But then I was delivered. I held on to what was left, even if it was just a sliver. But it wasn't just a piece. It was a seed that God decided to water by sending me the one I was meant to have. They soothed my shattered heart and brought me back. It wasn't fast, and it didn't happen at the start, but with God and them holding my heart, it became my new life. Anthony Sanders.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
You mentioned that you're not classically trained. Neither are we. We just love poetry. And, people are like, okay, they studied poetry in college, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking the only thing you can learn by studying poetry, in my opinion, is different styles, because the poem comes from your heart and from your soul, and that can't be taught.
I understand that. A lot of people just ask, generally whenever I talk about being a writer, they're like, well, did you go to college for it? And I'm always like, no. To me, all a college degree in writing would have given me a piece of paper that said, now I've studied how other people wrote, but I've still never written anything for my own.
I've been telling people that, what's your occupation? I'm a poet. And they kind of look at you. And I explain, yeah, I'm retired. So this is what I do, this and cooking.
That's kind of been the life of it.
I was going to say, tell us a little bit more about your journey. I know you talk about not being trained, but it's one of the things we love about our podcast is we want it to be open to poets of all levels, whether you're just starting off, whether you are trained in poetry, or published and all that. So tell us a little bit about your poetic journey, about how you started writing poetry or when you got into it, or is it recent or what?
Honestly, I've been writing for about a decade now. So I'm 26. I started when I was about 16, but I even started earlier than that. I just never put pen to paper. Because when I was younger, I was in a kind of an abusive household. Like I'm talking about when I was a little kid. And that's where I got that his hands were the reaper. A lot of people in my life have taken things from me. First, it was my dad. Then I got a little older. My mom and dad broke up. And then I was kind of just left unsupervised as a teenager. Then I got with my ex and made a string of bad decisions. After a near-death experience, I finally started writing. When I was 17, I nearly died. So I finally started taking all the poetry I was just kind of putting to the side and started writing a bit more. Got bad off on painkillers, started drinking real heavily, and after nearly ODing on a McDonald's bathroom, I decided I can't live like this anymore. I must have some direction in my life. I can't just go around aimlessly until I die. So I was like, well, what skills do I have? What can I do to help my life out? And I found out that I could write. The only thing that was ever very well received was my poetry. So I actually ended up getting published when I was 20 and 21. I published 2 books of poetry, and they actually won awards for literary excellence. So I was like, oh, hey, I'm going in a good direction. And then another person came along and took something. By this point, I was with my wife, the one that God sent to hold my heart and help put me back together. But I didn't have him still. Then I spent 17 and a half months in jail. It was in jail when I met God that I really learned to hone my craft, crazy as it seems. That was my college training, where I was able to really learn how to put emotions down, where I was really able to let go of the past. And it was after that, after the slow start and the many years of trial and error, that I was able to get out and be like, okay, now I know what I'm doing. Now I know what I wanted. So I continued going on. And this past month, my father died. And I kind of fell off the tracks. I didn't go back to drinking or nothing, but it was just difficult. And life was strenuous for a while. And it helped me understand that, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to be committed. I'm going to write my poems. I do post in places, but that's not the point. I'm going to write them. I'm going to give it to the world. And if the world don't accept that as it is, then I know I've done everything I could.
Well, I tell you what, I do find poetry to be a very personal thing. Even if other people don't accept it, sometimes it's good for yourself. And I will say, you talk about education. I think life experiences, I'm finding out, are some of the best educators for poets. If you listen to the podcast and some of the journeys that other poets have been on, it really seems like their life experience brings out that poetry, I think, more than any classroom setting is going to bring out. Like Phil said, you're going to learn techniques and styles and things like that. But when it comes from the heart, I really think those life experiences bring it. And also, you mentioned you had 2 books published. Are those out there? Is that something people can find?
I mean, yes and no. They are out there, but I don't talk about them anymore because I'm not in contact with the publication company anymore. Like I said, you spend a little time in jail and people stop talking to you.
Right.
So I don't bother really talking about them. I did publish them. I did win. Like I said, the Plume Board for Literary Excellence is a self-published award for books. They're small. I don't worry about them, truly, because to me, that was a stepping stone. It did what it was supposed to. The people who have one, but I can't keep going backwards to it.
Okay.
I can say that it's something I had and something I did.
Right.
You can tell that they're from someone who's young, someone who's not had the experience. They're riddled with the problems that come with a lot of inexperienced writers. And I don't mind people seeing that because, that's just where I was at the time. But for me personally, I like putting forward that which is present and new.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, if you ever do get another collection of poetry together and out there, feel free to come back and promote it. We'll have you on and you can talk about that if it happens, if it's something you're doing in the future.
If you ever want to read my newer work, even the 2 poems I just read, you can find me on YouTube under A Simple Poet. I put all of it on there. That's where I put all my new stuff.
Okay, we'll definitely include a link to that in our website and on our post for the episode.
Thank you.
All right, well, before we wrap things up, is there anything else you wanted to say about poetry or your journey or anything?
Writing isn't about the best words. It's about the correct words. You can sound elegant or you can sound correct. And that's really just for both us as poets and to anyone who's listening who might be thinking about writing and think that their work don't sound the fanciest. It doesn't have to. It's just got to sound correct.
I like that.
Good comment.
All right, well, before we close out, I have a little feedback for this episode. This one is from Mariah S. on episode 30 with guest James Bryant. You did a good job, and congratulations on your 30th show. That's crazy, so crazy. I've loved getting to know all these people, and it's just great. I think it's such a wide variety of people, and I just love listening to James, and he is such a wonderful poet. I wish he would let that resonate in his soul, because once he embraces that and gets that confidence, just imagine what his poetry will be like. He's amazing. So thank you, Mariah, for that feedback as always. And I've got a couple quick corrections here. Sometimes we misspeak or say something wrong, and so I just like to throw it out as a correction for the episodes. In episode 32 with Jonathan Phelps, Phil made a comment about the line, "To thine own self be true," and credited it to Shylock.
I'm so embarrassed about that because I really like Shakespeare and I should have known better.
It happens.
Polonius.
But actually, yes, that was Polonius from Hamlet. Shylock is the principal villain in The Merchant of Venice. Also, in that episode, episode 32 with Jonathan Phelps, we talked about D.H. Lawrence and his fear of bats in that episode. So this is just not a correction, but a point of information. That word is chiroptophobia. Chiroptera being the scientific name for bats, so chiroptophobia being the fear of bats. And then finally, episode 33 with Kevin Grant, we talked about the late St. Lucian poet Derek Walcott. And it was mentioned that he taught at Harvard in Boston, but actually it was Boston University. So just wanted to make those corrections. All right, and as we wrap things up, I want to let our listeners know we are grateful that you've taken the time to tune in. We hope you're enjoying the poetry shared here, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with others. If you would like to support You're the Poet and what we are doing here, we have set up a Patreon site at buymeacoffee.com/you'rethepoet. Thank you for your support as we continue to grow. If you've written any poetry and you want to share it here, whether you just have an interest in poetry, consider yourself an amateur poet, or are a professional poet with published works, contact us to be a guest on a future episode. Please check out our website and various social media outlets to keep up to date with You're the Poet. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and our website, you'rethepoet.com. Until next time, Phil, thank you for joining us.
Anytime.
Anthony, thank you for being our guest.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye.